Hey everyone, how's it going? We are now just a week away from the month of June, which means we are now just a week away from potentially hearing some new information about Blue Protocol. For those of you out of the loop, at the end of the closed beta, Bandai Namco held a survey and announced they will be providing feedback on the survey results and talk about their future development directions in June. What exactly they will talk about, I can't say. However, in this video I'm going to make some predictions based on the general impressions from those who participated in the closed beta, as well as my own. I'm going to do a rundown of what was seen as the good and bad points of the game, and talk about what kinds of changes Bandai Namco may make to address them. Let's first look at what parts of Blue Protocol were positively received. First up is the anime-style graphics and atmosphere of the world. The characters are beautifully presented, and I personally felt like they stood out even compared to other recent games. Besides the characters, the main city of the game is filled with small details, and however many times one runs through the streets and alleyways, there always seems to be something new to be discovered. The number of NPCs walking down the streets and standing at shops also makes the city feel alive. The game's large open fields and day and night system also help make one feel like they're on a grand adventure. Some people that played the game felt like there was a lack of variety in the different field areas, with everything just being grassland and cliffs. But I feel like this was just a problem with how much one was able to see during the closed beta, and we resolved as more varied environments become available in later tests and release. When I was talking to NPCs around the town, I saw hints at a desert area that we could potentially be seeing in the future. Next up is the story. In particular, the quality of cutscenes were top notch. I've only seen good things talked about the story so far. I also spent a lot of my time translating this part of the game, so I found myself quite attached to it, and I'm looking forward to what happens next. Continuing on, I also saw a lot of positive comments about the cooperative atmosphere in the game. Since there is no loot or experience stealing, one is able to join and attack monsters with other players without worry. There are also field bosses that spawn around the map which foster group play without needing to form parties. I also saw players regularly healing others who are low. In addition, if one is killed, other players can also go to their aid and resurrect them. Hidden quests are also another thing I saw positively received. Small details like hidden quests are fun to search for and a way to add depth to the world. I found a few of these myself during the closed beta, but I know there are still other ones that I didn't get a chance to experience. I look forward to searching for more of these the next time I'm able to play the game. Next is the freedom of cosmetic choices. Unlike other games where the player needs to make a choice of what armor to wear based on their level and desired stats, Blue Protocol completely removes stats from clothing. This allows one to have freedom to make cosmetic choices for what they wear. Next, let's look at parts of the game that receive negative feedback. While I will be presenting a lot of criticism with the game, negative feedback like this helps the game improve as a whole. These are the areas that Bandai Namco is most likely to address next month and as development of the game continues. Many of these things I also talked about in my own impressions video, as well as the video on Igaru's impressions of the game. However, in this video, I'd also like to look at the various ways Bandai Namco may go about fixing these issues. The first issue is the lack of bag space. I saw this being talked about by a large number of players. Items not stacking and only having 30 slots meant one's bag filled up quite quickly. There are a few ways I could see this being addressed. The first is simply increasing the number of bag slots. This is something that is most likely already planned, perhaps as one way of monetization. Next would be having separate slots for usable items. Players can buy potions to heal themselves, but these items don't stack and take up precious bag space. This could especially be an issue if things such as cooking and foods were added to the game later. If there were separate slots for these items, one's main bag could be dedicated to only material drops. One obvious fix would be for items to stack, but I feel like items taking up individual spaces is a deliberate design decision. I personally don't have a problem with items not stacking as long as something is done to alleviate the current problem. Moving on, the appraisal system is another issue that many players talked about. This is something I can get behind. I also didn't see the necessity of having items unidentifiable until returning to town. The window appearing and giving players an indication that their items are being sent to storage was nice, so one solution would be to get rid of the appraisal system and just have the pop-up telling players that their items are going to storage when they return to town. Otherwise, I could see Bandai Namco giving players a more in-depth explanation as to why the appraisal system exists and what they plan to do with it. The way the current appraisal system works also left players with more negative impressions of other parts of the game, such as collect quests, because one wasn't able to see what items they are collecting in the field. I know that item drops were mostly divided into the different regions of the map, but since that is the case, does the appraisal system really need to exist? The mount was another common issue players had with the game. In particular was the energy system it had. After moving a short distance, the mount would run out of energy and one would be dismounted. After that, one wouldn't be able to use the mount again until returning to town. I can think of a few ways that this could be fixed. The first way would for the mount's energy to slowly regenerate over time. This would allow the player to switch between going on one's mount and traveling on foot. The mount's energy currently drains even while standing still, so stopping this could also help alleviate the problem. Adding an option to upgrade one's mount could be another fix. I believe the mount already scaled with the player, but perhaps a similar system to how inner magians and weapons level up could also be applied to mounts to further increase their energy. And finally, while unlikely, reworking the energy system is another choice that could be made. Next up, parts of the combat being dull is one of the bigger issues players had with the closed beta, and is something Bandai Namco will need to address. This is a broad topic and covers many aspects of the game, so let's break it down. Let's first talk about dungeons being too easy. As I have covered in some of my other videos, players during the closed beta would just run straight to the boss at the end of the dungeon and avoid all monsters along the way. Dungeon bosses could also be defeated without much thought either. There are a few ways I could see this being addressed. First is scaling players to the dungeon level. Games like Guild Wars 2 have a level scaling system where players level scales to the level of the area they are at. This means that even at max level, the content of all parts of the game can still present a challenge for players. Blue Protocol could consider something like this for dungeons and other mission content in the game. The next possible solution is giving players a reason to kill monsters on the way to the boss. One way to do this would be giving enemies slows or knockdowns, which would incentivize players to stop and clear them out. Also, while not related to difficulty, giving rewards for defeating monsters in the dungeons would give players another reason not just to run by them. Another option to stop players from skipping everything on the way to the boss would be add other objectives to the dungeon. For example, in order to continue on to a certain area, getting a key from defeating certain enemies could be required. Or like I touched upon earlier, adding bonus rewards for defeating enemies could be another objective. Adding things besides monsters such as traps could be another way to increase dungeon difficulty. Traps could be present on both the way to the boss and during the boss fight. There could also be ways to disable traps. For example, traps could be on the path on the way to the boss, and if a group just runs through them, they would take a lot of damage. But if they stopped for a moment, they could perform a certain task to disable them. Increasing boss difficulty seems like another obvious way to fix dungeon difficulty, but how it is done is important. Increasing the boss's level, health, or damage are some options, but may not be enough on their own. And just making bosses or enemies damage sponges is a lazy balancing approach and is not something I want to see. Adding more active gameplay by forcing players to dodge various attacks or adding other mechanics outside the boss itself may be a better direction. For example, perhaps other enemies could heal the boss or disrupt players, making players focus on dealing with those enemies first. Or there could be sequences to boss battles where something needs to be done before damaging the boss further. This leads into the next topic of raids also being too easy. This is a similar issue to dungeon bosses. However, since raids are on a larger scale, I would also like to see some more emphasis on player cooperation. Let's look at a few ways raids could be improved. Currently, the raid boss in the closed beta just more or less acts as a damage sponge, so adding more interesting mechanics to the raid boss fight could make them more difficult and more engaging. I also gave this example in my own impression video, but during the closed beta boss raid, there were cannons that could freeze the boss, but whether players used them or not didn't really matter. However, if the raid boss could use a devastating attack that could only be stopped by the cannons, that makes them more important. And what if the cannons could be destroyed and were targeted by enemies that were spawned? That means if players didn't properly defend the cannons when the boss uses its ultimate attack, there would be nothing left to stop it from wiping out a large number of players. This also ties in with adding more mechanics to the raid battle, but not many players seem to be dying during the raid, so giving the boss a wider variety of attacks that force the player to react or take a large amount of damage could encourage more active and action-oriented gameplay. Another issue I saw brought up was the lack of skills and skill variety. As for the lack of skills, I saw some people complaining about a low number of skills players are able to use. However, in my opinion, this is not a problem in itself. Many games are taking the MOBA hero approach to skills and are able to create unique characters and gameplay. The lack of skill variety may be a bigger issue. Many skills in Blue Protocol just felt like standalone damage or healing. This is fine, but when skills are limited, it would be nice to see more interaction among the skills. For example, using skill A puts a certain effect on the enemy. If the enemy has an effect on them when you use skill B, it causes additional effect to occur. While simple, I did not see many skills like this when I played. Let's look at the spellcaster's starting skills as an example. The Q skill shoots a firebolt to enemy dealing damage. The E skill shoots piercing bolts of lightning dealing damage. The R skill creates a blizzard that deals area of effect damage. And the C skill regenerates EP over time. Besides that utility skill, these skills all deal damage, but there's no incentive to rotate among them. What if once the enemy had an ice debuff on them, if you hit them with your lightning skill, an additional bolt of lightning could shoot out from the enemy? Or what if using your fireball on the enemy with electric debuff on them allowed you to regain back some EP? This is just an example, but I would like to see something like this promoting skill rotations in the game. Lastly, one of the smaller problems I saw talked about occasionally was the lack of character creation options. When I played the game myself, I did feel like there were many characters who looked similar. However, it was still only the closed beta, and options like these are likely to be added in the future. One small thing I also saw mentioned was how the character's skin looks darker in-game compared to the character creation screen. I think this is due to the lighting, so having an option to toggle day and night in the character creation could be nice. Apart from the issues that players had with the game, I believe one of the closed beta survey questions can also give an indication of what parts of the game will be focused on in the coming months. Here is the survey question that I translated into English. The survey question asked people to choose up to 5 things they want to see added to the game. I suspect that all these things are being considered for development, and it's just a matter of what takes priority. Bandai Namco may reveal what is being most requested next month. Overall, I believe the current problems with the game are all things that can be fixed. In addition, despite there being a number of small issues, I also saw many players being vocal about how much fun they had with the closed beta. I believe a lot of the criticism stems from players' high expectations and how much they want the game to succeed. In any case, I expect Bandai Namco will address many of these issues next month when they give feedback on the closed beta survey results. Until then, though, we will just have to be patient and wait to hear what they had to say. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.